pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ruby is ill this evening and asked me to stand in on her behalf. So, at this point, she is excused as absent. And I think Sue will be arriving slightly later. That brings us to item 4A on the agenda, the approval of modification of the agenda. Does anyone have any changes? Okay, hearing none, we'll leave the agenda as is. At this point, I'd just like to make a comment before going on to review of the minutes. Mr. Robinson, you have been our videographer for a good long time and are very familiar with the way we run meetings. And I'd like to seek your assistance if we are doing something that is out of sequence, like not getting public comment before we vote on something, which we seem to forget about at our last meeting.
All right, I'll do that.
So if you don't mind, feel free to speak out and remind us. The agenda is built to handle that this evening, and we want to be sure and make certain that the public gets a chance to comment on any discussion they've heard before we take any votes. I always felt that was very important. So I apologize for letting that slip through last month. So we're now at item 5, approval of the minutes from prior 3 meetings, October 14th, which was tabled last month, October 29th and November 10th. I have a question for others. I don't believe the November 10th minutes were included in the packet.
No, they were not. I would ask if we could table those. We just hadn't gotten them done. We thought we would have them finished.
Okay. So it wasn't just one packet.
Yeah.
I would entertain a motion at this time to remove from the table the October 14th minutes for review and approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Jeff, seconded by Christine, to take from the table the minutes for October 14th. All in favor say aye, opposed no.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We're now reviewing the minutes of October 14th. Does anyone have any corrections? I have a correction on page 2. Down below, under section II, last paragraph, where it has my name, it says that Vincent Paul Migliore said it is pertinent that the vote that was taken on September 22nd was clearly a vote to the superintendent to come up with a plan to move to a K-6 configuration. He wanted to eliminate any confusion and stated it was not to do a study. That is correct, except that I said that it was clearly a vote to direct the superintendent to come up with a plan. If you make that amendment, I'll appreciate it. Anyone else? On page 5, under section 10, I believe Ms. McGraw's first name is Rohan, as indicated in the attendance. Third paragraph is a typo. And then in the section 10, fourth paragraph, next to last sentence, just need to pluralize schools. So we both know over 20 families that send their children to other schools because we do not offer a full-day kindergarten. Just a slight typo there. That's all I had. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing no other corrections for the minutes of October 29th, I'm sorry, October 14th. Is there a motion to approve as amended? Jeffrey, second?
Second.
Seconded by Ben. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The vote is 5-0-0. One excused and one absent. Okay, we're now reviewing the minutes of November 10th, which is the next item on the agenda, October 29th, sorry. Any corrections? That one on page 2. Paragraph 6, last, at the bottom of the page. Again, commentary that I made. Says Vincent Paul Migliore stated that he would like the superintendent to come up with a plan to implement a full-day kindergarten and additionally a half-day kindergarten to serve the entire district. It's not worded that way. It's worded as if we were doing both throughout the district. Corrections, anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to approve the October 29th minutes as amended. Christine? Is there a second?
Second.
Jeff? Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Vote is 5-0.
Abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay, 5-0, one abstention, that being Hebron. I'm sorry, that vote is 4-0. With one abstention. Catch that, Leah? Okay, I'll entertain a motion at this point to table the minutes of November 10th since we had no chance to review them. Moved by Ben, seconded by Jeff. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That vote is 5-0, 1-1. Moving right along, we are now at section 6, which is public comment. I'd like to recognize anyone from the public at this point that would have anything to say on any topic. And if you could, just please state your name and your town. Rick.
Mr. Vice Chair, thank you. Just 5 minutes of your time. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Rick Alpers. I live here in Bristol on Hall Road. I just wanted to update the board that to clarify some stuff that the local select boards have done. Just about after the Bridgewater Hebron Study Committee sort of finished their duties, it was asked that the 7 select boards of 7 town select boards get together and discuss, essentially, for lack of a better term, is the challenges facing the school system. The 7 towns decided to, in fact, have that meeting, and on November 19th commenced all 7 towns together. What happened that night was 6 towns were there, they were recognized, and one other town decided not to be a part of the meeting, but there was a selectman from that town that sat in the audience, sort of ex officio. And so at the end of the day, it was kind of remarkable, to be honest with you, because if you could call a meeting from 7 different towns and almost everyone shows up, it was pretty interesting. So it ended up being a great night. The goal that night was to discuss some of the challenges facing the school system, and I just want to be open and candid with you all, and I think I said that in my opening statement if you were there on the 19th. This meeting by no means was to undermine the school board or undermine the superintendent of schools. It was merely just to discuss some of the fiscal challenges facing the school system, not in any ways to meddle in your business, how we educate kids, how we run day-to-day operations. That's your job. That wasn't the point of the committee getting together, so I just want to make sure that's really clear. We by no means wanted to undermine your authority at that level. So we had a great meeting, and it was unanimous by all 6 towns to send a letter to you folks, which you'll be getting probably by week's end or sometime next week, showing support for you all in making those difficult decisions that are facing the school districts over the next couple of years. And it's really business model decisions that we discussed, even in the Bridgewater Hebron study committees. You know, do you consolidate schools? Do you try and do a K-6 program? And we just encourage you to keep trying those things to see what works in the district. And that letter will be addressed to you all, showing support of those different possible changes. And Terry, jump in if I'm missing anything, but the letter is not negative in any sense. We're not telling you how to do your job. We're simply offering the support of all, right now, the 6 out of the 7 towns that reside in the Newfound Area School District, that we're here to help, that we're here to support, and we encourage you to keep taking those different steps in trying to combat some of the fiscal challenges that face the school district over the years. And really, the letter was based off the demographics of the schools over the years. You can see that, years ago, the district was up around 1,600 kids, it peaked out, and now down to 1,100 and change. And so, how many schools do you need? How many rooms do you need for all those kids? And do those numbers continue to drop? And really, the statistics show that those numbers are going to continue to drop over the next several years. And it's actually kind of frightening to see that not as many kids are in the district and not as many people are moving to the district. And so that's really what the intent of the letter is. And that letter will be... Yeah, and the letter also states it's also an advocate of the full-day kindergarten. I know you took a vote that it just lost the vote, which is part of the process here. 4 state votes, not everything wins. But the letter, the 6 out of the 7 towns, they were in favor of having full-day kindergarten. Really starting to educate the kids early on to improve the student outcomes all the way through K through 12. So, getting at it nice and early when the kids are young. Speaking from somebody who has a 6 and a 4-year-old. So,
point out that it was unanimous.
Yeah, I did say that. It was unanimous of all the sitting selectmen that were at the table that night. But I just wanted you to be aware of that it's, we're not trying to undermine or do things behind your backs. We thought we'd come here tonight and tell you that letter is coming. And that way you won't be surprised or caught off guard. What the heck is this stuff? Where do these guys think they're getting off, guys and gals? We just want to be open and transparent with you.
Thank you, Rich.
Yep.
Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, Ann Learned, Bristol. I just really wanted to take a moment to publicly thank the guidance staff at the high school. My son Ben is a senior here at the high school, and he has just finished his college application process. And we were absolutely thrilled with the support that he received from the guidance team here. They're really small in number, but what they're able to accomplish and the support they're able to give our seniors has been amazing. I know personally we've seen that. Everything that Ben had asked, from transcripts to letters of recommendation to assisting him. I mean, they've called us about scholarship opportunities. They've really gone above and beyond, and I really wanted to take this moment to really publicly thank them and really commend them on a job well done. They're really doing a great job for our kids.
Thank you, Ann. We appreciate you coming to do that. We don't hear that from the public as often as it would be nice to. Thank you. Anyone else? Hey, I'm sorry.
I'm John Sellers from Bristol. A couple things is, I'm still getting wind and things flying through the air that, that middle school needs to be closed. And I don't know why you guys have it on the agenda, or not on this agenda today necessarily, but as far as why other people think this middle school needs to be closed. I think there's too many variables as far as, just thinking you can just close the doors and try to sell the building and move kids here and there. And also with the opportunity of Hill, if it comes to fulfillment and they actually join us, I mean, that's going to be an extra 80, 100, 120 kids, whatever the number might be. But that's going to also add more kids to that middle school. So again, it's not just a building I think you can just let go And I think the kids actually enjoyed going there, and it's a good middle place for the kids to, start to spread their wings at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I know you have an agenda item for the 7th and 8th going to the high school, and we're going to talk about that tonight, I believe, so I'll leave that comment to the end. All right? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, John. Anything else? Okay, we'll go on to item 7 on our agenda, which is announcements and recognition. We have our staff liaison report first.
A few weeks ago.
Yep, actually, if I can interrupt just,
Yep.
so Mimi had actually sent the school board and myself a list of questions that were supposed to be in the board packet under correspondences, and with everything going on, it stayed in one of my folders and never got there, so I gave a copy of it to pass around to the board members. That's probably a couple extra for
Thank you.
and I apologize for that, I apologize to Mimi, I didn't realize it hadn't made it into the packet.
I think my thinking is, I think before things continue on the line that they seem to be heading, I really would like to express the opinions of people who have come to me, which is my position here, with questions about what's going to happen. Because I think when I've discussed things with you folks before, I've said that I often feel like that you folks are looking at numbers and I'm looking at faces. And I think this sums up the same thing as if we were talking about children. These are people who work really hard every day, who are asked to do more and more and more and more and more every year, and would like to know what their future is before it's time to look for jobs. And that comes up really quickly in the spring. So people need to know what will happen to these positions. We have 6th grade teachers, not all of them, but some of them, who are certified in their subject area, not in elementary. So they cannot go and work in the 6th grade in an elementary school because they're certified in science or language arts or social studies. So what happens to them? What happens to our allied arts teachers? Some of them have been there 30 years. Just a lot of questions. What happens to our Read 180 program, which has helped a ton of kids? Is that going 3 different directions? What happens to the principal? What happens to the assistant principal? What happens to the guidance counselor? What happens to everybody I've listed here? What happens to our inclusion program, which has been so successful at keeping kids from placement? Is that going to be spread around 2 or 3 different buildings? I guess I would just like to be able to answer their questions, and I can't answer them. You guys have to.
I think you're right. I think this needs to be given due consideration as part of all of our discussions regarding the big picture, as well as the detail behind whatever action we might decide to take. I think that's one of the reasons why we then actually requested that we put the agenda item under 8A up for discussion, public discussion.
Another question that's been asked of me quite a few times is, for example, our media center person. She's been with the district a very long time. And there are other people in the district that have been here less time. Does she lose her job, or does she bump somebody else in another school? So that affects other schools. So it's just more things to think about.
Those are the kinds of particulars that have to be looked at very, very closely that might result in a change of opinion once presented to the entire board by the superintendent. But that will fall on Superintendent Butch shoulders to address many of the items that you brought to our attention. And there are far more as well that are even more detailed, I think, because this is a big decision.
And I think we often find, and we've found it in the past, is the unintended consequences of big decisions.
Another good example that we have to be sure we're okay with. I agree. Any other comments from the board?
At the Budget Committee meeting, the Budget Committee as a whole expressed their opinion that the middle school is one of our better buildings and that it should not be allowed to slip into disuse. They expressly put money back into their budget for repairs to that building. So I think that's a consideration the board needs to take, because they represent the community as well.
Anyone else? Do you have anything else you want to share this evening?
No, but as you can imagine, this has a huge effect on morale. And we see it every day. The uncertainties.
Clearly understood. My personal feeling on this is that each of these things need to be addressed as part of whatever consideration is going to be given to the topic.
Sooner the better.
Okay, we have a student liaison meeting with Allison.
Okay. I just want to congratulate a lot of people, mainly in the high school from other towns, their achievements. Congratulations to the following juniors on their induction into the National Honor Society: Katie Roman, Jasmine Patton, Cole Eastman, Megan Levy, and Zach Allen. 20 students have been selected to participate in the Lace Region Music Festival on January 17th. We have 12 students in band and 8 in chorus. Congratulations to the 111 high school students that got on the Quarter 1 honor roll. The high school's girls basketball team on their season opening against Franklin, 56-30. Salt named Bridget Lavin and Ben Leonard the outstanding male and female fall athletes. Congratulations to all the student of the month. And DES raised $165 for Kenny, an 8-year-old boy from Bristol who was diagnosed with a rare form of cancer earlier in the year, with their hat day during the month of November. That's all.
Thank you, Allison. Any comment? Appreciate that. We have other listed here. Is there anything else, Stacy, that you have?
I have a couple of just announcements and kind of things going on in the schools.
Okay.
I would like to also congratulate Paul Harris here at the high school, who was named one of the finalists for Assistant Principal of the Year. He's one of 3 finalists. The committee will be here on Wednesday interviewing people before they make a final decision. So even if he doesn't get it, it's still a nice acknowledgement of his efforts and supports here at the high school. I have 2 articles that I just, again, as we get into the Christmas season and the holiday season, our schools, our students, our teachers, it is amazing the donations and the efforts they have put in to support community members, kids who don't have clothes. There's, we get all the time lists of kids who need things that, staff are really quick to say, I'll get that, I'll get this, I'll get that. It really does show what a great community we are in, and how much people care about each other and the kids and the students in our, in our buildings, and they give. So these were just The student council at the middle school also raised money to support Gina's Place when they had a fire. One of the employees there was actually an employee at the middle school, so they did a fundraiser and raised $200 to help them with their things. Also Friday night, if you didn't see it, was Newfound presented at the high school as their senior play as A Christmas Carol. It was very well attended. There's another little article that was in the paper. On Thursday night, if you have nothing to do, the middle school will be hosting Into the Woods as their play at 6:30. I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's a great performance and a wonderful opportunity to see our students perform and do a great job. And we have a great theater program over there. The high school participated last week in a new initiative called I Am College Bound, I Applied, and it really is coming from the Department of Education, really as an effort for us to push students to at least start to apply to college, even if they decide not to go, to really get into the notion that college is available to you, that we should be pushing every student to try and at least fill out an application so that maybe you wrote that essay, you might not actually apply, but you wrote the essay, you have it, so now if you decide to apply next year, that is ready. And so that was really, it increased our actual enrollment of students who actually were going to apply. It really gets them in a good place so that at some point in time, if they decide, they're ready to go. And just we have tons of community concerts going on. All of our schools have concerts before Christmas or after Christmas. Check our district calendar. They're all posted there. And another great opportunities to see our students perform and the great jobs that they do. That's all I have.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any announcement or recognition? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 7, which is old business. Again, I would like to remind everyone we're going to hold any motions that might come about until after we hear public comment a second time on the agenda items. This is the discussion of moving the 7th and 8th grade from the middle school to the high school, which was tabled at our previous meeting. Is there a motion to take this from the table? So moved. Moved by Ben. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Sue. All in favor of moving this from the table, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the vote is 6-0-0-1. We now have the item open to the floor for the board to discuss the movement of the 7th and 8th grade from the middle school to the high school here. Ben, as this was your idea, I'd like to suggest that you comment first.
Well, again, and I started the discussion a little bit when I asked for it to be on the agenda, and we made the motion to direct the superintendent to provide a plan for implementation of K through 6. But it still doesn't address how the rest of the makeup of the district is going to look after that. Now, I bring this up because this is, in my opinion, how I see the best way to move forward is to make the additional changes to this building to create a 7 through 12 building, a junior, senior high school, and that down the road, I'm of the belief that the middle school property, that building is renovated to become a K through 6 elementary school, and the finer details of it, I think, will still be hashed out in how we can move to K through 6 and what the population numbers are actually at that time, and what makes best sense for the district. So it's my hope that when we get to the point of motions and decision making is that this board will look at establishing some type of a subcommittee that takes on that task, that takes on the task of meeting the needs of the current population of the school district, looking down the road that says, this committee's focus is going to be add space, reconfigure space at the current high school property to become a junior, senior high school, that takes into account everybody's concerns, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of the physical plan, how much interaction is too much, or how much are we willing to give up between 7th graders and 12th graders, or 8th graders and sophomores or juniors. That obviously we want to make sure that we're not just overtaking space and rooms and equipment that's being used to provide the high school education now, and that we're going to be able to maintain that programming once, if the transition were to ever happen. To develop a committee that takes into, the parents of the district, the taxpayers of the district, board members, budget committee members, all those different looks that are crucial to building a junior, senior high school, and come up with a plan and move forward with it. At least come up with the plan, come up with the numbers, the finer details of it, and present that to this board to either act on or hopefully act on. I'll just leave it there. So that's where I think we're at. There's a lot more discussion that needs to be had, and I'll say that my motion to go K through 6, as I worked through that process back in September, my take on it was, let's make this move first. It was really in some of the other factors, like if we go K through 6 and we do a bunch of building and moving schools around, that's a lot, and that's really going to set us up for failure. So the initial idea was, let's go K through 6 and then let's worry about the buildings and kind of in a staged effect, but I don't think that's possible. I think it all has to kind of come at the same time. I think it all comes together, and hopefully we can move forward with it. I still think this is a necessary thing. This really doesn't have, I understand a lot of the arguments, but at the end of the day, you have to look at the population numbers, and I find it very hard to look at it myself, but I find it very hard to go to the taxpayers and say, we need X amount of dollars, and can I look at that taxpayer and say, yes, Mr. Taxpayer, we are using your money efficiently when our buildings are occupied at 60% capacity, approximately. That's not an efficient use of funds. And I think this board, I'm probably willing to get off the idea to an extent if there's some better idea out there, but there really isn't. We hear time and time again that we're paying X amount of dollars to send our kids to school, and these districts are paying other amounts of dollars. Well, in order to get ourselves to that point, there's just decisions that have to be made. I get a little long-winded, I apologize, but.
I think these are the feelings that have to be laid out, and your thoughts on it are just as valid as anyone else's. I'd like to suggest that anyone else that might care to comment at this point, just jump in.
I guess I have to wonder what our facilities committee is doing if that's not what they've been looking at as far as our buildings and future use. I don't think we need to create another committee to do the job of one we already have. I would say that we need to give the facilities committee time to do their job and look at the buildings and determine what the best course of action is, rather than just jumping into things. We have had a huge amount of public input that says that the middle school should remain the building in the district. The budget committee supports that idea. I don't know if the answer is converting it to a multi-level facility. I don't know if it's leaving it at middle school. I don't know what that answer is. That's something the facilities committee has to determine. I do know that we have buildings in the district that are in far worse condition, and as far as traffic flows and safety, I'd hate to think that we were making a decision that would hurt us later on. So, to my mind, we need to sit still. We've got a surprising increase
in our elementary numbers right now. Those are gonna carry through this year probably. Whether they go up or down, I don't know. The trend says they're gonna go down, and I am inclined to believe that. But I think at the very minimum, we need to give the facilities committee time to look.
As chair of the facilities committee, that is our intent to look at the space needs, the condition of the buildings, and come up with a capital improvement plan that would address the student population levels and how they might best be met with the facilities that we have, and whether that means adding additional space at the middle school or adding additional space at the high school with the K-6 model based on Stacy's initial analysis a couple years ago. That's going to require additional capacity at most of the elementary schools. So as part of our plan, study of the buildings that will be taken into effect, that could be a significant cost that would have to be factored into the decision.
Any other comment?
If I can also, I didn't make copies of this, but it was just an interesting article that actually came out in November in the Laconia Daily Sun on the Franklin School District. And again, it's just food for thought in the sense of, so they closed their school, all their elementary schools except for one, because they felt like they had extra room. Well, now they're finding their elementary school is bursting at the seams, and now they're looking for, should they put in portable classrooms? So again, again, as you think about all of this, it's important that we recognize that we don't overcrowd our schools, close a school, and land ourselves. We have to think ahead. And one of the things that I've been really working with the board on is how do we start to think 5-10 years ahead, not what's in the moment. And I don't want to see us 5 years from now or 10 years from now where we've closed a school and now find ourselves, because moving 6th grade to the elementary schools will jam-pack pretty much every one of those schools. And so I don't want to find ourselves in this same situation, because we need to learn from our and others' mistakes and just make sure we don't get there.
Well, a few things. I do agree with Jeff. I think that we have to let our facilities committee do this study, complete it. This is what we've directed them to do. Take it step by step. And I've heard of another school district who did this, and now they're regretting it. They closed 2 elementary schools, I think, and now they don't know what to do because they have too many students. And I think that, yes, our middle school building, I think, is valuable enough to keep. And whether we can use it for some other things until the population comes back, because I think eventually it will, maybe we can do something else to make it so that we're not spending all of the money to maintain that building. Maybe we can do something to save on our budget. I don't know. There are a lot of things to look at, and I don't want to jump into anything here either very quickly until we've got all the facts to work with.
Christine, you're the only one we haven't heard from. Unless you don't have a comment, I'll jump in.
Go right ahead.
You okay? A couple thoughts occurred to me. First of all, the meeting that the select boards held on November 19th was extraordinary. And to hear that group of individuals get together and all agree that the school board is about to be faced with some very difficult challenges, I think is an understatement. To get them to be unanimous, inclusive of the individual that showed up from the one town that officially did not want to participate, who spoke in a similar manner. I thought was extraordinary. And to offer that support, to expand the dialogue to the greater community than just those that may follow the school board business is very important. Ben's comments regarding if it comes down to that, the addition of parents and community members to a subcommittee that might ultimately come about to facilitate whatever configuration change, which is what this really is. Because it looks like there's a desire to maintain the physical building, the middle school itself, which puts into question whether or not the other facilities need to be addressed, in my opinion, which would then bring us in line fiscally with our cohort districts. That's what the data says. I point out a couple of tidbits of information and reminders. I haven't read this article yet. I don't know what it says exactly, but I too am concerned about closing a facility and then finding out in the very near future that we need to build a brand new spanking up to speed physical plant to accommodate an increase in population. But I think that the job of leadership is to prepare the entity that we serve for what's coming. So we've got to get the big things right. And there is no data that tells me anyway, and those who read it, that the trend is going to change. In our packets this month, we had from the Commissioner's office a summary sheet with detail on it that talks about the student population from 08-09 of 192,000 statewide dropping to 181,000 a year ago, 2 years ago, 12 and 13. And it's lower still this year. So there's a very definitive trend there that we have to be aware of. And the question will become, at what point do we want to continue to sustain facilities and the support personnel that go with it at the expense of improving the student outcome of our children? I think we encountered the need to do that with our budget this year, where we finally were faced with some issues, some neglected maintenance that needed to be done to some of these buildings, needed to be budgeted for. And that's what made it difficult for us to decide, again, my interpretation, in favor of a full district-wide full-time kindergarten alternative that may yet come about if the voters decide that that's the way to go. That is the idea behind that is the responsibility of this board, and that is to improve student outcomes. The manner in which we do that and the challenge we face is going to be a big deal for the superintendent to make recommendations to us that will also include an impact on how we end up configuring things, because going K through 6, which I also want to remind people, was a directive to do 2 years hence in the 2016-17 school year. Not next year, but rather the year after. So if the trends continue, we're very likely to have fewer populations of each of the categories, K through 12. Number of students, 2 years hence. And that demographic total may make it more feasible for us to use our existing elementary facilities without crowding and without regretting a decision along those lines. I don't know, but I think the idea of relying on our facilities committee to consider these things along the way is appropriate at this point in time. We also need to give the superintendent enough time to come up with the plan to implement K through 6. And perhaps more importantly, all of the questions that Mimi has put forth, which in her mind and each of these individuals that are affected are primary to those individuals, those secondary concerns as part of the big picture that absolutely need to be addressed as part of it can in fact be addressed. Because those questions are going to come about, and if there are no good answers to them for some of the things that you mentioned in your report, that's going to change the mind of some people that are in a position to make this decision. When you're presented with the facts that impact student outcome, I think you have to make the right philosophical decision as a member of this board. Whether we will end up doing that or not remains to be seen. I think the issue of moving the 7th and 8th grade to the high school here physically, based on what I know, there is physical space to at least consider the idea. If we do close a physical plant, whatever that may be, and reconfigure the remaining physical plants, that's going to save us some capital that we can then use, at least the first and second year perhaps, to do whatever thing is necessary to make this a junior-senior high school, if in fact that's the way we go. And that's tax neutral, if you will. I don't know what the exact numbers would be. I'm concerned about scope creep when something like that comes about, because if you start talking about modifying a smaller building for just a small purpose, then the idea of, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well do this, comes into the equation, and the number gets bigger, and it makes it non-fair. So there's those concerns that will come up no matter what the decision ultimately ends up being. But at some point in time, this board, whomever it's consisted of, whatever membership it has at the time, has to provide the leadership of what's coming down the road, what's coming based on data and what we see. So those are my feelings and thought on the subject at this point in time. And I think that any action that we take is going to have to take into consideration some of the, what I will call secondary issues that will be uncovered with the approach that we've decided to take to go K through 6 first when the superintendent gets there. Some of those things are bound to be the issues, certification not being the least of it. I know Stacy is aware of those issues. We've discussed them. They have not gone unconsidered. Anyone else?
I guess some of the reason that I wanted to have this discussion was because of maybe just a lack of clarity on the scope or the charge of the facilities committee. So I guess I would ask for that. What is the charge of the facilities committee? And if it is ultimately not what I feel it is, and that's to look at our current facilities and develop a capital plan to address those issues, that to me is very different than saying configuration changes and how do we turn this into that and junior, senior high school here. If I'm wrong in that, then great, and if I am, and that's going to be part of the discussion at the facilities level, I guess I would just make it known that it is my opinion that with radical changes, and even if it is just, hey, we need a number of money to fix this facility, the input and the buy-in of the customer, our tax base, our parents, our students, and our administration and staff is important to that, and that's why I would like to see those types of resources used. To just take the facilities committee and come up with some of these bigger ideas, I think is almost setting yourself up for disaster at times. So I guess I would just ask for clarity on the scope or the charge of the facilities committee.
In the next section, we are requesting that we get approval to hire a third party to do a 20-year demographic study that would address some of the concerns that have been raised as to how we can really fit our potential population of students into our facilities.
So if I can sort of clarify, for the facilities committee, the goal of the committee was to develop a capital improvement plan. Now, as part of that, it certainly is looking at, so if, you know, if we needed to do $5 million in renovations to a school, is that feasible? The facilities committee was not charged with developing a long-range plan for the use of our schools. It was really for the building of our schools. So what do we need to do for improvements, setting together a capital improvement plan so that we can look at budgetary things.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If I'm not mistaken, we formed the facilities committee to achieve our goal, number 2, to evaluate the use and purpose of district assets in order to develop a long-range plan that meets the needs of our population. Which sounds pretty specific that it would include the use of the buildings.
Yeah, I think there's fair input here on all sides of this, and that happens to be a goal we all agreed on. I don't know that it was the purpose of setting up the facilities committee. I think that was an idea that Stacy had after making a recommendation in November of 1 year ago. And one of the comments I wanted to make here was that I think that if we allow this to progress, because the trend downward in student population, not just here in Newfound, but statewide, is ultimately going to be the reason why we will have to address this. We cannot continue to head towards one student, the theoretical minimum, and have 6 buildings necessary to educate one student. So at some point, as the population diminishes, we'll get to that magic number, whatever that is, that will force those in power and those who have the responsibility to show leadership. Something has to be done, because the taxpayers cannot continue to afford a higher than average cost per student than is currently shown in the commissioner's numbers, well above $13,459. That process is evolving. The fact that we have this discussion this evening is part of it. The fact that the 6 towns got together, the select boards, and realized that that model they called, as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, gentlemen, I think there was reference to the business model that worked in the past is no longer working. That being a middle school model. I submit that we are not suggesting that the middle school model be changed. We are suggesting that things be reconfigured with a K-6 and junior high, senior high physical plan be considered, with all the issues that are associated with that. Not the least of which is busing younger kids to the high school, how those get segregated, etc., and properly separated by age. Those are things that I think when Stacy does her analysis as to the impact of K-6, things like this will float to the top, and the evolution of what you've suggested, Ben, is probably going to come about. Well, let's get parents involved, let's get community members involved, and other taxpayers in general, beyond just the facilities committee. That's my feeling at this point. I see this happening down the road as an evolutionary process. Whether I'm right or wrong, will prove to, we'll see. But the numbers are going to dictate that we do something at some point in the future. Maybe.
2 things real quickly. One, we have 30 more middle school students right now than we did September 1st. So I'll throw that out there. And the other thing is, to me, it's 2 totally separate processes. Yeah, it's like a Venn diagram where they meet in the middle, but between facilities and the educational process. Facilities is buildings to me. and maintaining buildings. The educational process is what happens in those buildings and how that works, and what breaking that all apart, how that affects the educational process. Again, looking at facilities versus the educational process is, I go back again to numbers versus faces and kids. And to me, a facilities committee would be looking at buildings, because they're not educators. They don't know what the educational process is like in those buildings, in all fairness. So unless an educator is part of that process, then you can say, oh, we can put the kindergarten in the middle school, that's fine. No, it's not. Just something to think about.
There are, what, 2 principals on the committee, so we are trying to factor that in.
That's good.
That should be noted as well. I think you're right in bringing that up. On the facilities committee is more than just members of the school board. It was deliberately built, if you will, to include a broader representation, which is along the lines of where Ben has come from, I think. But for a topic like this, I think we certainly want to broaden that community participation. The fact that the select boards have gotten together and agreed unanimously was incredulous to me on a topic that they see coming and are willing to support us as a board.
I just have to say, hearing the term business model.
Yes, there are those who don't like to hear the criticism of big business without adding the term big government or big education, and that's always a debate.
I don't think of this as a business.
It probably has to be a combination, because it is a business. We are a $20 million business. The other side is we're not creating widgets, we're creating students and children. So it's really a combination of both.
Anyone else have any input on the board here?
I just want to publicly say that we oftentimes belittle the models used successfully by other districts, which they feel work very good for them. I had the pleasure this week of attending a function at the Russell Elementary School, which is a K-8 facility. If you ask any member of their PTO, any of their staff, they will tell you that they have the best school in the world. They're proud of what they have, they're proud of the way it works, and their programs, they make them work and they are successful. I don't want anyone to believe that any of us feel that any one model is better than any other. They all have their advantages, they all have their disadvantages, and the one that you're currently using is always the best. I have no personal favorite model. I think that anything can work, and it can work well if there's support in the community for it. It always requires dedicated educators, which we have. And I don't believe that if we ended up having to change our model, that our educators would be any less dedicated. Nobody likes change. It's hard, but sometimes it becomes necessary. At this point, I think that we do need to look at our options, but I don't think we need to be jumping into anything too quick. I have a little faith in our policy, our facilities committee.